What's up, my Jiu Jitsu community? Scott Barnes here with Gymnanigains, and I was coming across a video that I really wanted to watch. Last week we did one about a lot of strain that comes on the body training Jiu Jitsu and how it can affect you. And I found one that I really just wanted to have a conversation about. And it's a guy entering a Jiu Jitsu competition showing that it doesn't work. And I like to go over some certain things. So let's
entering a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu tournament to prove that it doesn't work. Just prove my point. They say 90% of fights end up on the ground. But 100% start standing up, and that's where we want the fight to end.
In a street fight!
Yet there's a whole martial art dedicated to this worst case scenario. That's like my karate class practicing how to get knocked out.
Okay, so we're going to stop right here, and I'd like to emphasize a few things. Now, one, this is a karate dojo, and we've seen this from Daniel LaRusso's The Karate Kid, and I don't want to say this is where it all starts, because Aikido goes back hundreds, thousands of years. But the one thing that I do want to mention is the fact where he started off saying that most fights end on the ground 90% of the time, and that is actually not true. It happens all the time. And I would say it's more like 100% of the time. And when it says ends up on the ground, that could be somebody knocked out. Someone's going to be end up on the ground. It's part of our human psychology and all through the animal kingdom. Our objective is to put our assailant or our enemy into the ground, into submission. And the one thing that I do disagree with too as well is that when he says all fights start standing up. So I think he's got it a little backwards. I am a little biased, but that being said, I don't like that we're going into a karate dojo where we're punching air, and I would rather someone go into boxing or even judo where we're practicing throws while standing up. We don't have to really go into the actual submissions itself, but the fact that, listen, Aikido works. We've got block, where you got the high block, we got the low block, we got a punch. Now listen too. Don't say that I don't know this stuff, because I've been to Aikido for 4 years, stopped. Did Taekwondo when I was really, really young for about 10 years, stopped, and ended up training Jiu Jitsu full time, becoming a black belt. So that being said, let's keep going and let's see if we can still debunk some of these things that he has to say.
Just makes no sense. I think Brazilian Jiu Jitsu only works if you play along with it. And to prove my point, I'm going to enter a tournament on the street and simply stand up. But first, I gotta practice.
Okay, turns out standing up is much harder than I thought. Especially when somebody wants to hold you down.
So that also proves the point, and I don't mean to stop it very frequently, but two things that are upsetting to me right now. One, the dude is wearing a black belt while rolling into another person's martial art. And I find that very disrespectful. But hey, you know what? I digress. Maybe that's the only one he had. But I'm not going to get too nitpicky on things. But he also did say something that was very interesting. He's like, hey, you know what? It is hard for me to stand up if someone wanted to take me to the ground. Yeah, turkey. That's how it works. We want it. When we have a standing, let's bring it in here. When you have two people standing, right? As human erectus that we are, and erect, standing up, just like that light over there, standing up. What happens if I push that light that way? Our arms can help us balance, stay up, right? That helps us. But if we tip it over hard enough, erect falls. It's just science because of gravity, right? Human erectus, gravity, fall. And when we fall, we are able to move around actually a little better because we have something to push off of. And I'll say this last thing too, because when we have a cage and a floor, to give an example, those guys do those Superman kicks, Superman punches right off the fence. That's because they have something to push off of. And so when we have that ground, we are able to use our elbow to post. We are able to use our foot to post. We have a lot of things to use as a ground. That's why it's a little easier for someone to control, because we have actual, what's the word I'm looking for? We have a base to push ourselves off of to get a submission or a different position on our opponent. Let's keep going.
Opponent. My next opponent is just a brown belt.
Just a brown belt? You guys. Aikido. Probably can get your black belt in 4 to 5 years. All right. It doesn't work that way in Jiu Jitsu and Judo. Just a brown belt. That I can't. We're gonna keep going.
But he immediately chokes me out.
Just a brown belt.
Okay. They call this an Ezekiel choke. And now that I know how it works, I can easily avoid it. My last opponent is a black belt. Luckily, I'm both younger and stronger. But every time I try to stand up, it ends the same way. This is not what I had in mind. That's when my brother Oliver appears.
Not as easy as you thought, huh?
As a professional fighter, he knows what works and what doesn't.
Put this on and meet me upstairs tomorrow. And don't forget what belt you are in BJJ.
And he's got a plan.
I respect that. His brother humbled him.
Crash course in standing up. You smash me from top. Every second I spend here is a second I get more tired while you get more rest. So I need to relieve this pressure. I'm gonna wiggle this arm in here and this arm is gonna go in here. Now I have a frame, but I can't push you from here. So I'm gonna use my strongest muscles and I'm gonna make a bridge. Ooh! Now we have a few options. This direction, this direction, this direction, and that direction. You have to feel where your opponent is heavy. So don't move against the resistance, but use the easiest path available. Stay on the move all the time. If you're on top, you can rest. But if you're underneath, you need to work.
I better start training.
I'm the best around. No one's ever gonna hold me down. I'm the best.
All right. I know this is awesome comical. I do like the fact that, hey, and we went to the reference of, the Karate Kid. But his brother did make a good point that he was using the ground as opposed to use the path of least resistance. And so being on the bottom, which remember too, the art of jiu-jitsu is the littler guy can have a better advantage over the bigger guy with technique. And to his brother's point, when he's on the ground, you use the point of least resistance and figure out a way to use that and get out. So, yeah, I totally agree with that.
I am not afraid of the ground. I'm the best.
If he goes back into a gym,
no one's ever gonna take me down.
Subscribe!
I'm gonna have some.
I'm the best around. I am not afraid of the ground. I'm the best around. No one's ever gonna take me down. Stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up.
That was actually pretty funny.
It's finally game day. After weighing in, they check my sleeves to make sure I'm not hiding any nunchucks. But what they don't know is that I am a weapon. Unfortunately, the weather is not great, and it looks like it might start raining. If that happens, my plan might not work. Unfortunately, I can't control the weather. All I can do is start to warm up and hope for the best.
I do like Atomic Ease, by the way.
That's when they suddenly announce my name. It's finally time to see if Brazilian Jiu Jitsu works when you don't play along. When the fight starts, my opponent immediately tries to grab my sleeves. All I want to do is push his hands away. That's when he does something I never imagined. He just lies down and tries to pull me on top of it.
Okay, and that's where we're going to start. Right here in this whole episode. The guy's pulling guard. he's pulling the guard. Wrestling. Here's some things that you got to remember, especially being as a white belt and him competing with a white belt. Remember this: when he was training with just the brown belt, right, and the black belt, what happened? Submission after submission after submission, right? Someone who trained, and we did this video before, about 6 months, 3 to 6 months of just 3 to 6 months of 3 days a week of training jiu-jitsu. You're going to know more than 90% of the world of submissions, combat sports, kind of stuff. But once you start getting to the blue and purple belt, that's when things change. That's when like the takedown and the judo comes in. Because as a white belt, you're kind of like a baby, and you really don't know how to use your arms and your legs, and you're kind of flailing around, spazzing out, not really like connecting the brain with the body. Sometimes we just fall and get into this type of situation.
But of course, it doesn't work, because I just stand up. Now, my opponent grabs my lapel, so I try to strip his wrist off with both hands. But his grip is too good. That's when he tries to pull me down again. But I just pop back up and move away. I can sense that my opponent is getting frustrated, because I refuse to go down to the ground with him.
What was the 2 points
That's when he
for?
tries a new tactic. He goes for a foot sweep. I decide to return the favor, but he fails. But luckily, he just lies down anyway. This is when I realize that all my training has made me overqualified for this tournament, because I'm never ending up on the ground. That's when the referee suddenly stops the action. Apparently, I've broken some kind of rule. He tells me that I'm not allowed to disengage, and if I don't start grappling, I'm gonna get disqualified. And now my opponent refuses to even stand up. I doubt this is what the ancient samurai warriors had in mind when they invented Jiu Jitsu. Because it was supposed to be used as a last resort when your weapons fail, and the last place you want to go on the battlefield is the ground. But something changed when the art spread to Brazil. It became a sport, and the essence was lost. This is the exact same thing that happened to karate. Today, you can even become an Olympic champion by getting knocked out.
He does have some point there. I know where he's going with that.
So now,
But
I am left
let's
with no other
get
choice
back
but
to
to
that here
finish
in a
the
second.
fight. It's time to put the martial back in martial arts.
Does he
This
get him in
was not
Ezekiel?
part of the plan, so I have to find a way to win. Luckily, my opponent gives me his leg, so I try to break it. But the referee tells me I'm not allowed to do that, so I have to let go.
Oh, he should have gotten
Trying my
DQ'd.
best to avoid my opponent's attacks.
If he was in IBJJF,
but I'm
he'd have
afraid
been
that if I'm
DQ'd.
too passive, I will get disqualified. So I'm left with no other choice but to go down to the ground. And luckily, I know exactly what to do from here. And just like that, I proved my point. Because no matter what martial art we practice, it's important that we don't lose sight of its original purpose.
If he would have just stood up, that would never have happened.
At the end of the day, it's not what you do, but how you do it.
I really wanted to say this. He actually disproved his point. He just disproved his point because he just went, well, I might as just go out on the ground as well. Like, what are you going to do? And then on top of that, he uses a move that he learned. Like, it's just fascinating. Like, it really is, man. You know, I know he's just giving a goof off this. I find
Every
it funny.
martial art has its time and place. But one thing is for sure. Those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it.
Yep. It's real. There are no second places on the street. So, I did some research, and it turns out that this statistic is for law enforcement, because their job is to take a suspect down to the ground and put handcuffs on them. It doesn't apply to street fighting or self-defense for civilians. So the next time somebody tells you that 90% of fights end up on the ground, tell them, yeah, if you're a cop.
I'm confused. I'm very confused on that. Yeah, I don't know really how to end that. But here, let's just say this. The guy had some fun. I don't know if he really disproved a point, because everything he said, I think, contradicted himself. And I could be wrong too. But after training for as long as I have, I don't know. Let's roll. Let's roll. And for someone that's been in Taekwondo, Aikido for 15 years, as long as Jiu Jitsu, I'd like to challenge that guy. All right, guys. Let me know what you think. See if I'm wrong. I don't know if I'm going crazy. Talk to you later.